Hello everyone, it's Ranger S64, and welcome back to another League of Legends lore reading video. Today, we will continue to read The Bird and the Branch by Ariel Lawrence. Taliyah bit her bottom lip. She looked around the inn, excitedly bouncing in her seat. Chapter 5. The evening in the inn was late, and the wooden tables are sparsely populated. It had been so long since Taliyah had been around people. She looked to her grim companion, who had insisted on the darkened corner booth. The man, who now serves as her teacher, didn't count. The scowl he had worn since agreeing to the meal at the remote inn offered little in the way of camaraderie. When it was clear that he was as much a stranger here as anyone else, he relaxed and settled down into the shadows, his back firmly to the wall and a drink in hand. Now that he was no longer distracted, his concentration and watchful eye returned to her. "You must focus," he said. "You cannot hesitate." Taliyah studied the leaves swirling at the bottom of her cup. The lesson today had been a difficult one. It had not gone well. In the end, they had both been covered in dust and shattered rock. Danger comes when your attention is divided. "I couldn't hurt someone," she said, eyeing the new rip in the metal around the man's neck. Her own clothes had not fared well either. She looked down at her new overcoat and traveling skirt. The innkeeper's wife had taken pity on her and offered what she had on hand. Cast-offs left by some previous patron. The long sleeves in the Ionian style would take some time to get used to, but the rich fabric was sturdy and well woven. She had kept her simple tunic, faded from so much wear and tear, determined not to give up what was last bit of her home she still had left. Nothing was broken that cannot be mended. Control comes through practice. You are capable of so much more. Remember, you have to improve. And you have improved. But what if I fail?" she asked. The man's gaze drifted as he watched the fear door in the inn pushed open. A pair of merchants came in, stamping off the dusty road. The inner keeper motioned to the open tables near Taliyah and the man. The first moved toward them while the second waited for his drink. "Everyone fails," Taliyah's companion said. A small edge of frustration passed over the man's face, marrying his otherwise restrained demeanor. "Failure is just a moment in time. You must keep moving, and it too will pass." One of the merchants looked at the seat at the nearby table and watched Taliyah. His eyes drifted from the pale lavender of her tunic to the glimmer of gold and stone in her hair. "Is that a Shurima girl?" Taliyah did her best to ignore the merchant. He caught the protective glare of her companion and laughed it off. "Would have been rare once," the merchant said. The girl stared at her hands. "It's a bit more common now that your people's lost city has risen." It was that Taliyah looked up. "What?" "Word has it the rivers flow backwards, too." The merchant waved his hand in the air, poking fun at the mysteries of a far-off people he considered simple. "All because your bird god has returned from the grave." "Whatever he is, don't make any difference. It all threatens trade." The second merchant joined the first. "They say he aims to collect his people. Misses his slaves and all that." "Good thing you're here, and not over there, girl," the first merchant added. The second merchant looked up from his ale, suddenly noticing Taliyah's companion. "You look familiar," he said. "I've seen your face before." The door to the inn opened again. A group of guards entered, eyeing the room carefully. The one in the middle, clearly a captain of some sort, noticed the girl and her companion. Taliyah could feel a quiet panic rise in the room as the few guests stood and made their way quickly to the exits. Even the merchants got up and left. The captain wadded through the empty stools towards them. He stopped a blade's length from the table where they sat. "Murderer," he said. Chapter 6. "So this is where you have been hiding," the captain said. "Savor that drink. It'll be your last." Taliyah was on her feet just as she heard the whisper of steel drawn next to her. She looked over to see her teacher staring down the roomful guards. "This man, Yasuo," the captain spat the word, "is guilty of assassinating a village elder. His crime warrants the punishment of death, to be carried out on sight." One of the guards leveled a loaded crossbow. Another knocked an arrow to a longbow nearly as tall as the girl. "Kill me?" Yasuo said. "You can try." "Wait!" Taliyah cried out. But before the word had even finished on her lips, she heard a trigger snapped, and the vibrating hum of a longbow's release. In the heartbeats that followed, a whirling gust picked up inside the inn. It spiraled out from the man beside her, blowing abandoned glasses and wooden dinner trenchers off the tables. It reached the arrows, breaking them mid-flight. The pieces fell to the ground with a hollow clatter. More guards swarmed in, their swords already pulled from their sheaths. Taliyah laid down a field of sharp stone, pulling up each rock through the floor in a violent explosion to keep the men away at bay. Yasuo slipped through the crowd of soldiers. Trapped in the room, they brandished their weapons, foolishly trying to parry the sword that stormed around them. Its metal arching like lightning. It was too late. Yasuo's blade flashed in and out of the men, trailing lethal ribbons of red in a whirlwind behind him. When all of those who had come for the man had finally fallen, Yasuo paused, his breathing heavy and fierce, his gaze locked with the girl's, and he prepared to speak. Taliyah held out her hand in warning. There, at his back, rose the captain with crazed eyes and a broken smile. He wielded his sword with both hands to keep a grip on the blood-slick pommel. "Get away from him!" Taliyah pulled at the cobbled floor of the inn, the flat stones erupting, lifting the captain off his feet. As the captain's body was knocked up, Yasuo was there to meet it, the cold blade cutting through the captain's chest in 3 quick strikes. The body fell to the floor and was still. More shouting was coming from outside. "We must leave. Now," Yasuo said, as he looked to the girl. "You can do this. Do not hesitate." Taliyah nodded. The ground rumbled, shaking the walls until the tattered roof began to vibrate. The girl tried to contain the power she felt growing from beneath the floor inn. A vision passed in her mind. Her mother, hemming a raw edge of cloth, singing to herself. Her even stitches running away from her hand. Her fingers a blur of motion. The rock beneath the inn burst in great, rounded arcs. The stone columns threaded themselves in and out of the ground like a wave. Taliyah felt the earth rise, carrying her onto the dark night. the wild wind that was Yasuo following close behind. Chapter 7. Yasuo looked back at the distant inn. The round stitches of stone had sewed the paths shut and blocked off any oncoming approach. It had brought them some time, but dawn would be coming soon, and with it, more men with them for not only him, but possibly even the girl. They knew you. Taliyah's voice was quiet. Yasuo. She held on to the last word. We need to keep moving. They wanted you dead. Yasuo let out a breath. There are a lot of people who want me dead, yes, he said. And now, some will want you dead as well. If it matters, they named a crime I did not commit. I know. Yasuo was not the same name he had given on their journey, but it did not matter. She had not asked about his past in the time they'd traveled together. In truth, she had not asked anything from him, except to be taught. She watched her mentor now. It seemed her trust was almost painful to him. Perhaps more than if she had thought him guilty. He turned and began walking away from her. Where are you going? Shurima is southwest. Confused rose in her voice. Yasuo did not turn back to face her. My place is not in Shurima, and neither is yours. Not yet. His words were cool and measured, as if he were steeling himself against a coming storm. You heard the merchants. The lost city has risen. Tales to scare the tradesmen and dive up the price of Shuriman linen, he said. And if a living god walks the sands, you don't know what that means. He will reclaim what he has lost. The people who once served him, the tribes. Taliyah's voice strained with the emotion of the evening, her words boiling over. She had journeyed so far to protect them, and now she was a word away when they needed her most. She reached out, a hand's breadth from pulling on his arm. Anything to make him listen, anything to make him see. He will enslave my family, her words echoed off the rock around them. I must protect them. Don't you understand that? A gust of wind picked up, stirring pebbles on the ground and whispering Yasuo's black hair around his face. Protect, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Does your great weaver not watch over them? The words now came through gritted teeth. The man, her teacher, turned towards his lone student, anger flashing in his dark, haunted eyes, the raw emotions startling her. Your training is unfinished. You risk your life returning to them. She stood her ground and faced him. They are worth my life. The wind swirled around them, but the girl was immovable. Yasuo gave a long sigh and looked back to the east. A hint of light had begun to break the blue-black night. The last of the turbulent gusts calmed. You could come with me, she offered. The hard lines of the man's jaw relaxed. I have heard the desert mead is quite good, he said. A soft breeze tugged at the girl's hair. And then, the moment was gone, replaced again by a memory of pain. But I am not finished in Ionia. Taliyah studied him carefully, and then reached inside her tunic, breaking a long, loose thread. She offered the length of hand-spun wool towards him. He looked at it suspiciously. It's a tradition of thanks among my people, Taliyah explained. To give a piece of yourself is to be remembered. The man looked at the thread and took it gingerly, and tied it to the back of his wild hair with it. He weighed his next words carefully. "Follow this to the next river valley, and that river to the sea," he said, gesturing towards a lightly worn deer path. "There is a lone fisherwoman there. Tell her you wish to see the Freljord. Give her this." The man withdrew a dried maple seed from a leather pouch and pressed it to her hand. "In the frozen north, there are a people that resists Noxian rule. Without them, you might find passage back to your sands." "What is in this Freljord?" she said, testing the word in her mouth. "Ice and stone." He added it with a wink. It was her turn to a smile. "You will move quickly with the mountains beneath you. Use your power, creation, destruction. Embrace it. All of it. Your wings have carried you far," he said. "They may even carry you home." Taliyah stared at the path leading down into the river valley. She hoped her tribe was safe. Perhaps the danger she imagined was just that. If they saw her now, what would they think? Would they even recognize her? Baba Jean said that no matter what color of thread, no matter how thick or thin the draft was as it was taken up on the spindle, a part of the wool always remained what it had been when it started. Taliyah remembered and took comfort in that. "I trust you that you will weave the right balance. Safe journey, little sparrow." Taliyah turned to face her companion, but he was already gone. The only sign he had been there were a few blades of grass that rustled in the morning air. "I'm sure the Great Weaver has a plan for you too," she said. Taliyah tucked the maple seed carefully into her coat and stared down the path into the valley, the stone beneath her boots rising eagerly to greet her feet.